It was confiscated by the government. By the way, never returned. The government kept it. It was stolen. Let's be real. By Roger Vere's own standards, it was the government that was in the wrong. His own anarchist standards, right? What does Calvin do? Does he just be like, the government's got it, we're trying to work on it, blah, blah, blah. He goes silent? No. Takes his money and runs, his millions of dollars, billions of dollars, takes the money and run? No. Makes every single person whole. Every single person got their money out of his personal money. Now, fast forward. Roger Ver is a major investor in a gambling site called CoinFlex. He's promoted it. He's invested money. He's got other people to invest in it. He's gambling himself and runs up a gigantic gambling debt. And because of his gambling debt, not confiscation, right? Not the government steps in. No, because of Roger's gambling debt, this platform that he invested in and promoted can't pay back the people who have accounts. Does Roger go into his personal funds and simply deal with his own gambling debt? No. As a matter of fact, he publicly says, I don't owe them anything. And as a matter of fact, they owe me money.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Tobias Ruck podcast. I just had an amazing and very spicy conversation with Vinamani, now known as Cyprian. And we talk about a very controversial figure, Roger Ver, and especially his involvement in the creation of Bitcoin Cash, his involvement in BTC in the lead up to that. Also, Bitcoin SV, what was involvement there? And most importantly for us, obviously, because now we're working on that, eCash. And there it gets really, really bad in my view. Like that gets really bad. Very controversial, very interesting. We also talk about the new concept. After that, NEX, a non-custodial exchange, especially in contrast to a DEX, a decentralized exchange. What are the differences and why do they really matter? And why should we like focus on a NEX instead of a DEX? Vin and I and others, Amuary Sechet, and also the Thorsten Pohleit, the president of the Mises Institute Germany, talking about CDBCs. We'll be at the Prague, the Electronic Cash Conference in Prague from the 26th to the 28th of August. It's going to be really, really good. And if you can't make it, we got online tickets, because if you have travel or something, we got online tickets. We reconstruct the venue online, so you can like have your own avatar, interact with the other participants. You can like jump on a like couch or something, and just start video chatting right away. And I think this is really what these kinds of conferences are about. It's about learning, from the speakers and everything. But it's also, most importantly, I think, about interacting. Like you see a speech by someone, and then afterwards you're like, oh, what do you think about that? What do you think about this? I think that's the most important aspect of that. We'll have really, really interesting talks, very novel kinds of views and perspectives. I really recommend it. Also, you get 21% off if you use the promo code RUCK, R-U-C-K, like in reference to the 21 million Bitcoin, I guess, or 21 trillion eCash now. Link is in the description, 2022.be.cash, and have fun. So happy to have Vinamani on the show, or Cyprian now, but you will always remain Vin for me. Like
that's fine.
Nothing really changed that. Maybe professionally I will refer to Cyprian from time to time, but
that's fine. That's fine. Yes.
So yeah, let's.
My wife, by the way, says that you're our son. For everybody to know.
Oh.
She said, who are you talking to today? I said, oh, I got a conversation this afternoon. She saw me pulling out the gear and she's like, who are you talking to? So I'm talking to Tobias, and she said, oh, our son? Of course you have to talk to our son. This is how she feels from the time when you were here. So you have a very, very special place in the heart of myself and my whole family. So Yeah. So I
I
can be Vin to
appreciate
you.
that.
That's perfectly fine.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. And I feel very like she's always been very warm to me, and I really, yeah, I do really appreciate it. All right, let's jump right in. So I had a little like maybe 3 tweet exchange with one BCH guy on Twitter, and he was like from the whole smart BCH quote unquote fiasco. Like people aren't really like, oh, it's not that bad, but in my view, it's really bad. And people are also like, oh, like it's a permissionless network, anyone can do anything. And then I said like, no, like Roger Ver like pushed this, like he told me specifically to build on that thing. And yeah, and I think people aren't aware like what kind of damage this actually causes. Like we can say it's a permissionless network, people can do whatever they want, but there's a difference between that and then actively pushing something as a thought leader.
It's hard to quantify the damage though, right? Like I think that's the big problem for, especially for those of us in a field that is, engineering based, and we can always fall to the technology, right? And like what I just find interesting is the pattern, right? That's what we were talking about before we started. Is like, for me, I'm never, what I'm always looking for is I'm looking for a pattern of behavior, because like I always say, and whether people fall as far on this side as me, I think that we could argue about where the spectrum is, but I always say Bitcoin is not a software project. Like Bitcoin is a social project. And into that, I also weave economics, because we're going to talk from the Austrian side, right? Human action. Economics is a social issue, right? So it's a social project that leverages software, but it's doing things that have been done for thousands of years before software was a thing, So ultimately, it's not about the silicon, it's about the carbon. That's where the value comes from. By carbon, I mean people, right? It's not about the silicon, the machines, it's about the carbon. Amuary told me the other night in a conversation, he said, wetware. We just got to start calling it wetware, right? And I was like, oh, this is very cyberpunk, William Gibson, 1980s, right? Like, totally.
Hardware, software, wetware.
Yeah, hardware, software, wetware. And the wetware piece of this, the pattern that I notice is every time there's something that happens that's clearly bad on the wetware front, the apologists jump immediately to the software and hardware, and they don't want to talk about the wetware. They want to imagine that it has absolutely no effect, as though the things that take place within a given chain, within the software, within the hardware, are not choices made by human beings, which is an absolutely crazy thing to say if you know anything about the history of Bitcoin, right? Like at the end of the day, all the forks, all the schisms, all the everything is choices, sometimes completely insane choices, made by human beings who have gained some amount of influence, power, whatever you want to say it is, right? So one of the things that has kept me oriented toward, in particular, Amuary Sechet, right, and bitcoinABC, one of the things that has kept me oriented toward them is their recognition of the fact that there are bad decisions and good decisions, and those are made by human beings. And that certain human beings in this space are prone to make bad decisions over and over and over again. And sometimes, and I think Roger Ver is one of these people. It took me a long time to actually realize this, right? He was one of the people that I think I pegged wrong for a long time. And I think one of the reasons why I pegged him wrong was my own, because he was warm towards me, right? He supported the things that I did. He spoke publicly often in a very positive way toward me, right? Taking his sort of social cred and pushing it on me. I mean, I guess I could still consider him a friend, even though there's been some, that shifted very much in 2020. And he said some things where I was like, what is this? Right. But even then, things were kind of patched up and whatnot. And so Rogers, I think that we can talk about this pattern, right? How do we start to quantify the damage that bad decisions can make, right? That's a very important thing. It's something people don't talk about very often. We could talk from BTC. We could go into the thing that happened with BSV and Craig Wright. We could talk about, because it was really Roger, man. Really Roger that caused the split. We can discuss how it was almost exclusively Roger. That is the reason why eCash split from BCH.
Because we were on the forefront of that, and we might even, like, BSV might be even the same story, right? Like, because there was a lot of involvement on that front. Yeah, and maybe it's hard to tell for BTC because I haven't been like, I actually have been exposed to the whole big block debate after the BCH fork. Like, I was someone who joined later. And it actually was Roger who introduced me to Bitcoin Cash and the whole like big block view.
Absolutely.
And I told him, like, thank you for like doing that and for evangelizing in that way, because I would have like not been on Bitcoin like at all. Like, I probably would have viewed it as like an interesting thing that's too expensive to use, but that kind of thing. But yeah, do you have any insight on the BTC end?
I do
from there.
But before we do this, I think it's important, because we're going to talk about an individual here, right? And that's always very dangerous. Like, it's dangerous from the standpoint of, let's say, our own mindset, and it's dangerous from the standpoint of like what we bring upon ourselves to do that. So I want to say, like, again, Roger has been very kind to me in a lot of ways. Okay. And I think that it's been a reciprocal relationship with me toward Roger. I'm not trying to tear the man down. He's clearly, if we look at the history of Bitcoin, for better or worse, he's had an outsized impact. There are very few people in this space who have had more of an impact. Also, there is probably nobody in this space who has kept more Bitcoiners alive, paying their rent, able to put food on their table, and to work in Bitcoin, again, for better or for worse, because some of those people probably shouldn't have been working in Bitcoin, in my opinion, right? But in terms of building an industry, there's absolutely no one who has had a bigger impact, right? But again, it's for better or for worse. Like, he's had an impact, and I think that it's important that if we're going to be sober and look at history and try to have a view towards how to make good decisions, we need to like examine, well, was this the best decision? Yes, we survived it. Yes, we moved forward. Might there have been a different outcome if things would have been done differently, right? That's not to say Roger's a bad person. This is not to slander Roger. There's been enough of that. And I think it's always been poorly placed, right? And so with that as a segue of the slandering of Roger, it's mostly come from the BTC side, from the maxis, right? Who now are seeing defections, right? So I think that's why this is a good conversation to have, because they've been in the wrong about a lot of things. And for me, a lot of the reason why I defended Roger and assumed Roger was maybe a more positive actor than he was because he was being attacked by people who were such bad actors.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend, kind of.
Well, and who admitted that they were toxic. And I never saw that outward toxicity from Roger. And you won't, because he's not that type of person, right? Even if he's going to do something against you, right? Because he's going to defend himself, or he's going to, try to get the upper hand in a given situation, it's not going to look like that. It's going to be behind the scenes. There are things that that's just how he operates, right? So I wanted to preface it with that, but let me just say about the BTC thing. So really, I had not been following a lot of the big block debate. And this is specifically about Roger, because he's the reason I took notice. And when I took notice was, so the fork was August 2017, right? When I took notice was February 2017. I was at Acapulco. I was speaking there. It was my first time being there. Bitcoin.com was one of the big sponsors. They were for the first time doing, what did they call it? Crypto Polko, I think. It was like the last day, and it was all cryptocurrency stuff, right? So Roger was there. Bitcoin.com was a big sponsor. And on that last day, I remember, and this was what, you know, Bitcoin was on a rise. I remember it hit 1,000 when we were there that weekend, right? And it was the first time it had been 1,000 since I had liquidated in 2013. Right? So this was the first time that it had climbed back to 1,000, and it took 4 years to do it. Less than that, a little over 3 years, right? Because it was like fall of 2013 or whatever. There was a panel discussion. I wish they were recording all of this. I don't know where the recordings went. None of this got up on YouTube, because it should have, right? Like, I think it's important history. And if Berwick or anybody sees this, or somebody passes it on, somebody find that video and put it up on YouTube. There was a panel about, you know, Bitcoin. I think it was just sort of questions to questions from the audience about Bitcoin. And it was Rick Falkvinga, Bruce Fenton, Tone Vase, and Joby Weeks from Bit Club, the guy who's now arrested, the scammer, right? Now, Joby wasn't supposed to be on the panel. It was supposed to be Roger, but for some reason he wasn't up there, right? So they're going through their thing, and the big block debate comes up. And Tone Vase, like, being, you know, the beginning of the maxis, he starts going on. Rick Falkvinga's about BCH, big blocker up there. You know, Bruce Fenton's like sort of like in between. He's just like, I just love Bitcoin and hope that, you know, he's Bruce. You got to love Bruce, right? He's you know, not going to take a side on these sorts of things. Tone starts talking, and Roger like basically runs into the theater, and right in front of me, like I'm sitting with some other dudes right in front of us, grabs a mic, one of the questioner mics, grabs a mic, looks up at the guy running the board, and is like, turn this mic on, and just starts going off. Right? He's like, Tone Vase, I'll bet you $10,000 in Bitcoin right now that something, I think it was that Segwit wouldn't activate or something like that, because they were talking about Segwit. And just called Tone, and Tone Vase is like, well, I don't do that because I would never spend my Bitcoin, so I would never like bet it. And he's like, so what? 5,000? He's like, 2,000. 1,000. What are you, you know? And I know that throughout that whole time, the two of them had been going at, because there was like a whole podcaster area and everything like that. You know, all the podcasts of that time were there, and the two of them, you can find this from 2017 and Acapulco, the two of them like debating each other very forcefully. I mean, Roger was very, very forceful about the situation. But I think the important thing is, one, you know, Roger he was not a supporter of Bitcoin Cash and bitcoinABC initially, right? He wanted his way on the ticker BTC. Like, this ticker thing, that's been the issue, really. Like, he wanted his way, what he wanted on BTC, and he was willing to spend the money, whether that was diplomatically or, you know, propaganda wise or whatever. And that's why we have like Reddit, you know, the RBTC subreddit, right? That comes from out of that. You know, why is all the Bitcoin Cash stuff been on RBTC since 2016? That's why.
It's still
Roger,
there after 5 years. Yeah.
It's still on RBTC. Why? Roger, because he was like, no, the BTC ticker is mine. Right? I've put in all this work. What I say should go. And I think that more than anything, right? It wasn't about Bitcoin. It wasn't about, there was this narrative that it was about like, permissionless cash for the world and all of these sorts of things. But when you scratch the surface, so much of it is about Roger Vere's ego. And again, like, who am I to talk? Right? Like, I'm not trying to pass judgment on him. I'm just trying to say, like, this is an underlying thing that's happening and a pattern, right? And also the ego of others. But to such, and you see in the maxis, the fact that he became the great Satan to them. He became, and it was because here is this guy, this one, so much of everything they did was about thwarting Roger Ver. Because he would always walk into a situation like he was entitled to it, and I've got the resources to make this battle happen, right? I will battle you if I have to with the resources that I have. And so that's how you get UASF, right? That it's like this populist movement. No, we're a bunch of guys. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have Roger Vere's money, right? I'm Tone Vase. I don't have $10,000 to bet against you right now. You know what I mean? I'm not here representing Bitcoin.com with, he had booth babes. He had hired these super hot, like Mexican models who are walking around taking pictures with everybody. You know what I mean? And he's there in his Bitcoin.com shirt, and he just decides he's not going to show up to the panel, but then he's going to grab a mic and just, take over the thing. And it's that, right? So I think in many ways, and then it carried on that, like, why did he stay the enemy? Right after that, right after the fork, I think right after he had decided that he was going to pick up on BCH, I had him on my podcast. I think this has got to be pre-November. Maybe it's November, September. I had him on my podcast, right? People can go and find that. Vin Armani Show, Roger Ver. It's the only time he was on. And he went on and just started blasting actual people, like calling them out. This is the person. This is the person. It was Luke Dash Jr. It was just, Adam Back. It's blah, blah, blah. And he's just going down the list of people. He's all name names. This guy, this guy, this guy. They don't want Bitcoin. And I think even at that time, he was hoping to somehow get back to BTC. Right? I think the hope has been there for a long time to somehow get back to Bitcoin. That was the BTC thing. I think in a lot of ways, if we look back, it's like, if Roger Ver isn't there, how does it go differently?
Because you don't have this rallying point, this like scapegoat that you can focus all your energy on and like rally people around. And but you also have less resources. And the question is, like, I'm not sure if that's the good point to talk about, but like, it seems maximalism is almost like built, like there's also maximalism in Roger Ver's side. It's also like, oh, we only have 21 million and it's going to go up if everybody uses it. It's the only real difference really is that the maxis say, oh, like it's going to go up if you hold it and not spend it. Whereas the cashers say, oh, it's going to go up if you do spend it and use it. And I think, and that's a different conversation, but it seems like this conflict, there's a lot where like you have, like, it's almost inevitable that you have the hodler side be like, because it kind of makes more sense, right? It's like, oh no, like we just accept that this is all a everybody just puts in money and the number goes up, and
greater fool.
Yeah, and I can see how that is very appealing. And it's very simple, whereas the Roger Ver side, like it's much more complex, and given his background, it's very easy to like paint him as the villain, right? And sometimes he can, I mean, and maybe I should preface that as well, because you prefaced that, like, I also, like, I'm now quite a respected person in eCash and crypto in general. But a lot of that is thanks to Roger. Like like I was on his, he made a Bitcoin Cash show a bunch of times, and my name was there quite a few times, and was like, yeah, this is a great guy, and I like that was really good. Like I really respected that, and you know, for a very long time, I was always a very big fan of Roger. But you know, and the thing in London, right? That I think really was
Yep,
like, oh
absolutely.
wow. I asked him,
I
hey,
mean,
can you?
that was a
and
big,
he went for it.
Yeah, him sort of being there for your debut of that card. I mean, the cosign, you couldn't have had a better cosign, right? Like that was, I mean, for that would be like for an artist, you know, to get featured on, like, to have a feature on their album from like Jay-Z, like another rapper who was like unheard of, for Jay-Z to be like, yeah, I'll be on your album, you know what I mean? And then it's like this hit song, you know what I mean? It's huge,
right?
and he did that with, but the thing is, Roger has done that for so many people. So that's where it gets dicey, because, well, then the question comes, like, well, then should he have, like, is he actually entitled to call these shots that he wants to call? And it's not an easy answer to say yes or no, right? It's not an easy answer. It's a situation where you say, well, you can't ignore him. And that's maybe the danger. So it's like, you can't ignore him. So you've got to do one of two things. You either have to wholeheartedly support what he's presenting, or you have to fight against it tooth and nail, because it can't be
either
ignored.
or. Yeah.
It can't be ignored. So whenever, if he's going to throw his, so that's like, well, if you're that person, the discernment is, I'm going to do something here by throwing my hat into the ring. I'm going to create like a much stronger opposition to something where people might not be opposed, right? And it's going to cause a conflict, because if we go back and the tweets are still there, right? Like, people can look this up. Adam Back himself, there's a series of tweets between him and Gavin Andreessen where he says, okay, how about this, Gavin? We raise, now mind you, Adam Back is the CEO of Blockstream, and Blockstream is the main reason that UASF happened. They're the ones who put the money and the effort and the propaganda behind it to make the whole Segwit UASF thing. That he's like, how about this, Gavin? We raise the blocks to 2 megs now, 4 megs in, I think he says 2 years, and 8 megs in 4 years. And then we regroup and see where we're at, right? Which would mean that BTC would be at 8 meg blocks now, which would suffice for all of the current traffic on BTC, BCH, BSV, and eCash. Not BSV. Right? Because they're faking, they're doing something. BSV wouldn't exist, and BCH would have never had to exist, right?
Yeah, but why did it not happen?
Because Roger, this is what I'm talking about the animosity. It became a situation where that reasonable position from Adam Back, who could have made that happen, right? That reasonable position was abandoned because it sounded too close to what Roger Ver was suggesting. And when there was active animosity toward that, basically what you do is you harden the position of the people on the other side.
So he's Trump. He's the same archetype.
He's Trump. That's exactly right.
Because like you see that on Twitter all the time. It's like, oh, like this seems like they always bring it up. Oh, you Trump supporters. Like what like why do you group me in that? And many people are like, the Michael Malice talks about that all the time. It's like it's just incomprehensible. Anything that's not their position is not the same as
well, they call those,
yeah.
the term for that is polarizing. It's a person who takes people are grouped around, usually they're grouped somewhere around the middle, but enter a polarizing figure and everybody splits off to the extremes, right? That's what happens. Like, Roger Ver is a polarizing figure. Trump is a polarizing figure, right? So when you see that, you know, you can go through all of the forks, right? So you could go BTC. So that's talking about it in terms of BTC, right? We can see it in the BSV BCH split as well, right? Because you remember that the crescendo of that, and people can go and see, you know, just Google Roger Ver, maybe I was fooled or maybe I was tricked, right? And it's going to pull up the video where he reads. I had called him out like 2 days before that for not saying anything, but he was doing all kind of stuff in the background clearly, because he's reading an email from Craig Wright, a screed, where Craig is cursing at him and calling him all these things and saying, I will make it so that no coin can trade for 2 years, no trades, we'll double spend exchanges, all this type of stuff, right? To Roger. You know, he's personally furious at Roger, right? So much of it is a personal attack, and it becomes, the hash war becomes a war basically against Roger. And then the lawsuit that comes after, right? It's Roger and Jihan. But Craig doesn't have a relationship with Jihan. You know, like Jihan's around, but Craig doesn't have a relationship with Jihan. Craig had a relationship with Roger, right? He had a relationship with Roger. And it became, you know,
and
you
Roger defended him a lot, like publicly and explicitly, right? Like someone was talking about it, and like 10 minutes later, Roger was like, "Oh, I just want to remind you that they are calling Craig Wright a fraud or something." And I, you know, like you can say what you want, like that's kind of the thing Roger was doing. And now in retrospect, now that Craig revealed his true colors, like it seems like he should not have done that.
Well, the question becomes, what was Roger's motivation in that, right? And like, I can't know, you know, I can't know that, but I think I'm a relatively good judge of character, right? I think so. And there were some things in Hong Kong at the what was it called? BCom conference. It was the first thing that CoinGeek put on, the first CoinGeek conference that they put on. It was Hong Kong in April 2018, the infamous yacht party convention, right? And it was sort of the last time that there was a unified BCH community, right? It didn't take long for that to fall apart. But there was a lunch that occurred in the Four Seasons Hotel. Calvin Ayre put it on, and it was very interesting because he had, you know, I guess rented out the restaurant that was there. It was a Michelin star restaurant, I think a Chinese restaurant, if I recall correctly. And he, you know, they came down and they're like, Calvin is inviting you to lunch, you know, to a few key people. Calvin's inviting you to lunch. Please, like, come up and have lunch with Calvin. And so we go up there, and it was actually very interesting because there were 3 tables, right? And each table had maybe 8 people at it. Now, here's what was interesting. So at Calvin's table, Craig was not at Calvin's table. Craig was set at another table. So was Jihan. So there was a table where Jihan was there. There was a table where Craig was there. But at Calvin's table was Amuary Sechet, Roger Ver, Johannes Vermoral, one of longtime poker, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but a online poker guy, longtime, you know, friend of Calvin, myself. That may have been it. There may have been one more person at the table. But you know, the seats were like he had the assigned seats or whatever, and it was like Amuary, Johannes, Roger, me, this dude, and Calvin. And that was the entire conversation, because I don't even remember if there was other people. I don't remember them being involved in the conversation.
Oh, and you were on that table?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what was very interesting to me was like to see the power dynamic that was playing out there, right? Like in Calvin's mind, clearly these are the people that matter. Into like Craig, I already got. Jihan, not gonna. There's nothing there. Jihan's an enemy, right? He's an enemy. It was like it very much felt like a keep your enemies close sort of situation, right? And he had his other poker buddy. And it was interesting that like the first thing that came up was about poker and asking if we all played it. Like maybe we should do like a little poker tournament or something. Do you play poker? Do you play poker? Do you play poker? Right? I found it very interesting that this was the question, right? Oh, do you? And Roger's like, oh yeah, let's do poker, right? Because Roger's a gambler. And so, and I don't play poker. I lived in Vegas. I don't play poker, right? So, but I found that those 2 or 3 days, you know, Roger, I could see, you know, that Roger saw Calvin's money as like a tool, an obvious tool. Like it's here, you wouldn't want to lose this, right? He could appreciate it, the capital, the resources, like this will enable us to attack BTC. But Craig is just like, well, if you want Calvin's money, you gotta play the Craig is Satoshi game. Right. This is very, very much what I saw at that time. And, you know, I think what it ultimately came down to was what Roger saw was he was being played like it was poker. You know, they were just they were clearing people off of the table. So another part of that, you know, Johannes ended up working for them, right? The Terab, right? So they bought him. And what was a very funny thing was that the first night we were there and sat down, it was myself, my business partner, Jeff Paul. We sat down at the table. Everybody was having dinner, like all the presenters and stuff like that was having dinner. And that was the first time that I had interacted in person with Amuary and Johannes. And it was just the 4 of us talking the whole night. Right. And one of the things that Johannes said was, because we had just gotten our venture capital, he was like, you shouldn't take any investment, shouldn't take any VC. You should just build your company from scratch. That's how I built my company and all of this. Very funny that he ended up taking Calvin's money. Right. And they had asked us with Cointext, give us a number so we could take it to the board. Right.
You referenced that on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're salty. Like BSV guys are always like, oh, you're salty. Calvin didn't give you any money.
Oh no. They didn't know when we showed up that we had already taken our investment. And I think that part of that was they were trying to see if we would come on board. Right. Like they were like, okay, well, and likely it was because I had a bit of an audience. They saw that people were, you know what I mean? A little bit of an influencer, like. And had we taken Calvin's money, probably my profile would have been considerably larger, right? Like they were definitely playing that game, you know, interviewed me on a whole bunch of things because they produced all these videos. Guess what? You can't find them. They've all been made private. So even if you go and look at the links, they're all private on CoinGeek, right? But everything highly produced. I was all over all of their videos, right? So I think that this was what Roger was missing. He has capital, but that slickness, the production quality, the willingness to splurge, you know, and the mining, all of that was like, okay, here's an opportunity for us to maybe take back and get like BTC back. These guys are kind of on this, whatever. But what it turned out was, no, they're playing their own game. And so, again, here you have this polarizing individual where you wonder, what does this look like if Roger's not there? Right? how does this maybe turn out? Look, Craig's a sociopath for sure, right? But how does this turn out a little bit differently in terms of the relationship between, say, bitcoinABC and BSV, or bitcoinABC and Calvin, if there's no Roger, right? Because
Do you
one
know
of
what
the things
Amuary was saying about Calvin? And I mean, I don't want, like, maybe it's a bit private, but because he would probably be the steering of the other side. Like, he would probably be the biggest factor there.
Well, you know, another important thing happened during those days, right? Another important thing. And again, Roger plays right into it, right? So I think the day that the conference ended, the last day, I remember I was getting in an elevator at the Four Seasons where this thing was taking place, and where, by the way, Calvin had so graciously, like, first class, right? Flights to Hong Kong, you know, beautiful room at the Four Seasons, right? For me, right? I was like, this is
Wow.
crazy, right?
Wow.
This is awesome. So I'm getting in the elevator to go up to my room, and Roger gets in, and he's all like, you know, and he turns to me and he goes like, looks like we're going to get a treasury. I just got out of a meeting. All of the miners are going to do a treasury for the developers. So
yes,
he had flown in all of the big, no, he hadn't flown them in. That was the key, because nobody from CoinGeek showed up. Jihan had arranged it himself with the other miners because they're all Chinese. So all the other Chinese miners, it was in Hong Kong. They just all came in. Right? So it was them, the ABC guys, Roger was there, and no CoinGeek. They didn't show up because those are the enemies, the Chinese miners. The Chinese miners are the enemies. Right? But, you know, Roger, that's not where he's at. That's not where he's at with it. He still thinks he's in control, and it's his narrative that's going to play out. So he's supporting this. He was giddy. People should know, like, I was the first person to see him when he left that meeting. He was giddy. I'm telling you right now. So that's what the eCash thing was about, like, wasn't it? Like, that's what the split was about. Very interesting that all the way back in 2018, Roger's pushing for this. He's pushing for it, right? But when it's his idea, and when it means that he's out in front of the whole thing, this is going to be, you know, Calvin didn't want to play that game. So, you know, you got to think, how does this play out if Roger's not there? How does even, because again, Amuary's at that table. It's important.
Johannes that table.
Yes, Johannes is at that table. Amuary's at
the guy who wrote the original article, right? They all were there.
He was, well, no, I'm talking about the table with Calvin at lunch.
Oh,
right? Those guys, yeah, Zhang's War and all of those guys were all there, right? But I'm talking about what is the relationship between Amuary and Calvin if it's not filtered by Roger, right? Because I'll tell you, that day sitting there in that conversation, because Roger's to my right, Calvin's to my left, it's a conversation between Roger and Calvin. I mean, yeah, Amuary's talking, Johannes is talking, I'm talking, but it's really a conversation between these two guys. And a lot of it is like a dominance play, right? Like, who's the alpha at, yes, it's Calvin's table, but who's the alpha, right? And even during the thing, Roger's walking around, he's walking backstage, he's handing people pins. Here, wear this bitcoin.com pin when you go out on stage, right? Before everybody goes on stage, he's giving them that. Yeah. And he's like walking around. Calvin's just sitting off, just watching the presentations, right? He's got his little coterie of people around him, whatever. Two different vibes. And that's ultimately what that whole conflict broke down to, was who's the man? Never mind Craig. Craig's a puppet of Calvin, right? He's a tool. But it's like, how does this look different if either Roger isn't there or if Roger is playing this in a different way? You know, if Roger doesn't show up, let's say he doesn't show up and he sends Emil, right? He sends somebody else from Bitcoin.com at that time. There were other people that he could have sent, but no, he's got to be there. It's got to be him, right? Even though it's not his thing, like it's Calvin's thing. So how does even the relationship between bitcoinABC and Calvin Ayre look different? Because what did bitcoinABC need? What have they always needed? What was the whole thing about the treasury about? We got to get paid. Calvin's a businessman, right? He wanted to own everything, but maybe that didn't have to happen. You know, and here's Roger playing this thing in the middle where he's like, he's there. He's giddy about this. He's pushing the idea of a treasury, even though, and it's happening at Calvin's conference, and it's something Calvin doesn't want to take place. Right? And Amuary's there. Why wouldn't she be? Roger's there. Right? And I know, you know, Amuary doesn't feel great about Craig, but like, how is that relationship different? Right? And this gets to, do all these bust ups, does all this polarization, does it affect the value, the price of the coin?
Well,
you know,
definitely. Like, because at the end of the day, it's about like for me, crypto, the way it's, especially Bitcoin, the way it's playing out currently, it feels much more like a religion. And we know the origin, right? And we know the origin of religion is religio. It means to bind together. And if we have bust ups, as you said, it's the first time I heard that term, but if you have something where it breaks people apart, where it gets divisive, where it gets polarizing, then it fails to be a religion. And that's why, you know, and we can get into the Orthodoxy and Catholicism, but way, maybe not even today. But if you have a religion that constantly creates division and that does not bind together, and also a religion that has a dollar sign attached to it, which is very weird in my view, but you know, that's how it's playing out, and we have to accept that that's how it's playing out. Then yeah, it will 100% reflect on the price.
Here's the thing: Roger Ver is, you know, whether you agree with his positions or not, I think philosophically, I'm mostly aligned with him in terms of his stated beliefs, right? Does his actual embodied behavior, is it totally consistent with his stated beliefs? No, not by far, right? So, but hey, whose is at the end of the day, right? Again, I'm not trying to pass judgment, but there's no more uncompromising person that I've ran into in the space than Roger. Like, for everything that people say about maxis being toxic and uncompromising, no one is more uncompromising than Roger. And I say this on like a personal level of things that I have tried to speak with him about particular decisions that led to some of the things like CoinFlex, like BC, like the smart BCH, right? I mean, one in particular was when he figured out that you could use, because this goes directly to CoinFlex, that you could do SLP tokens and you could pay out dividends to individual coin holders, because you knew what addresses they were in and you knew the total supply, so you knew what percentage they had and you could pay out those dividends to them, right? Which is exactly what the model of the Flex USD was when it started, and the reason why he involved himself with CoinFlex. It was an SLP token, right? And then that got too like cumbersome to do as an SLP token. As it grew, it didn't scale very good, this idea. So that was the whole reason why he was interested in smart BCH, was because it was easier to do that sort of payout on an EVM because Ethereum virtual machine, because all you do is you do what's called rebasing. You just increase the value in the, in the database, right? So each one of them has a little database. You don't have to actually send out UTXOs. You can just do one automated thing that at the end of the day, it just goes and you send a transaction, rebase, and it does it all in one transaction, right? But when that started, this one I know because I was contracting with Bitcoin.com. I was building their payment servers, and it was me and Joey King. And I think Joey King is the one building CashTab right now, right?
Yes. No, absolutely. Right. Like I interact with him all the time. He's asking me about Chronic, and yeah.
So he will tell you it was him and me. It was the thing that I was building, and then he built the dividend thing. And when I talked to Roger about this, so he built like the dividend kind of front end and logic layer on the website, and it had to interact with the payment server to build out the thing that Roger had, right? And Roger massively promoted this. He was very interested in it. And I told him, like, Roger, from the beginning, I said, Roger, you're going to need to not present this as dividend. You're going to need to be very careful because that's going to be an unregistered security. Like, you're really, really getting close here to kicking the gorilla in the nuts. As Craig writes, this is Craig's specific criticism of Roger, calling it anarchist, and they want to kick the gorilla in the nuts. And part of the reason for them going so far into like statist coin was a reaction to Roger.
Yes.
Think about it.
That makes sense.
Think about it.
I never thought about that. Yeah.
Because Roger is the anarchist. He's doing everything to go, and this is just an example that, like, okay, imagine you're Calvin Ayre, right? Calvin was 10 most wanted of the US Marshals at a period of time. People don't know this. He was on the 10 most wanted list because of his stuff with Bodog, the poker site. He had like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars confiscated by the US government. They had him for a violation of the Wire Act, the gambling act. He was in the you can go look up Calvin Ayre, US Marshal most wanted. He had a wanted poster, top 10. You go to the Marshal's website, they have the top 10 most wanted loose criminals. Calvin Ayre was right there. Right? He ended up settling with them. There was a whole situation where, like, one of the reasons he's highly respected was all of the people whose money had been confiscated, which is so interesting, the CoinFlex situation right now, because the parallels between Roger and Calvin, right? Calvin was involved with the business. That was an online gambling business, which is what CoinFlex is, okay? But it was a poker business that he had built. The federal government, US federal government, confiscated all their money, put him on the 10 most wanted list, and there were all these people who had their money confiscated who were on the platform. What did Calvin Ayre do? Mind you, he's on the run. He's in Antigua. That's why he became an Antiguan citizen, so that he couldn't be extradited, right? If he leaves Antigua, he's going to be arrested. Anywhere that he goes, the US Marshal is gunning for him. He's trying to negotiate a settlement, which he eventually does. And it's a pretty good deal that he makes. It's not even about the Wire Act. He gets off of all of that, right? But he can never come back into the US or Canada or any of these things. So maybe he can go back to Canada. I think he's a Canadian citizen, or he was. What does Calvin Ayre do when, like, Bodog, I don't know whether it was Bodog or some other poker site. I think it was Bodog. It all gets confiscated. Calvin Ayre takes his own personal money and he makes every single person whole. Every single person that had an account on his site got all of their money back out of Calvin Ayre's personal bank account.
Wow. That's pretty admirable to some extent.
So I think that's very important, I think, for BCH people to understand who is Calvin Ayre, right? Whatever you believe about what, his situation with Craig Wright and all of that, that's real history. Okay. Calvin was part of a platform where the money got confiscated. Not they lost it, not they gambled it away. They were financially responsible with their money. They had the money. It was confiscated by the government. By the way, never returned. The government kept it. It was stolen. Let's be real. By Roger Vere's own standards, it was the government that was in the wrong. His own anarchist standards, right? What does Calvin do? Does he just be like, the government's got it, we're trying to work on it, blah, blah, blah. He goes silent? No. Takes his money and runs his millions of dollars, billions of dollars, takes the money and run? No. Makes every single person whole. Every single person got their money out of his personal money. Now, fast forward. Roger Ver is a major investor in a gambling site called CoinFlex. He's promoted it. He's invested money. He's got other people to invest in it. He's gambling himself and runs up a gigantic gambling debt. And because of his gambling debt, not confiscation, right? Not the government steps in. No, because of Roger's gambling debt, this platform that he invested in and promoted can't pay back the people who have accounts. Does Roger go into his personal funds and simply deal with his own gambling debt? No. As a matter of fact, he publicly says, I don't owe them anything. And as a matter of fact, they owe me money. So now let's flip back, right? Let's flip back. The war is between Calvin Ayre, who is that person who made everybody whole, and Roger Ver, who we now know that placed in the same situation would not make everybody whole. How would you line up, given it to do again, knowing those two facts?
It would be
Who's
very
the
different,
good guy,
right?
Who's the actual good guy here? It's important. Hindsight is 2020. I know how I would have lined up. Obvious.
Mm.
To me, it's very obvious.
if you factor out Craig Wright, the whole Craig Wright story,
it doesn't even matter. I wouldn't even need to factor out Craig Wright. Right? What I would want to know is, I want to talk to you, Calvin. I want to know what you're doing with Craig, because you don't really believe he's Satoshi. Like, what's the deal? You've pulled a con here, but are you a con man? Like, and if you are, you're a weird kind of con man. You're a kind of con man that would like make all these people whole, right? So it's like, that's a weird kind of con man. And he is a weird kind of con man, because you know what he hasn't done with BSV? He hasn't done a rug pull. He's continued mining at a loss.
It's still alive. There's still, everything is still going, right? There's still projects. There's still.
He really believes in it.
I think they recently launched a stablecoin or something on there, right?
He really believes. He is wrong. Or is he, right? It starts to make you wonder, like, what's valuable, right? What's really valuable? Because, you know, the thing about Calvin and his relationship with the government is, and Craig said it, because so often what comes out of Craig's mouth, you know, it's things that Calvin has told him, because Craig's not a very bright or articulate person. Let's be real, right? He's very good at lying because he has no conscience, and he's entertaining in that regard. He makes
he's good at crypto babble.
Yes, he's a great liar, right? Like he's a practiced liar. He's like a pathological liar, and pathological liars are good at babbling. They're good at finding, because since they're liars, since they're deceivers, they're constantly looking for, you don't have to be intelligent to just look for things that you know other people wouldn't understand, to repeat those words. Look for obscure things that people don't know and then repeat that to them. And then find the people. You're very good at finding the people who you say that and they're like, oh, and you're like, gotcha.
And
I don't even know what that
fell for that for a certain period, because some of the things were coherent, and some of the things are like, oh, I never thought about that way, and it kind of makes you think, and you like try to puzzle things together, but it takes you a while to realize, oh no, this guy is just lying. And for me,
Mhm.
it's very hard to put myself on the shoes of someone who is a like pathological liar, like who it's very hard for me to relate to that.
That's important. That's important because that's how sociopaths and psychopaths are able to survive. Because most of us, well, they say they're like between 1% and 3% of the population. Psychopaths, like born psychopaths. Sociopaths is something a little bit different, right? And what's funny now is that, and I'm not going to say it because it's controversial. I'm not even going to say it. We're doing good so far. I'm not going to be provocative, but that's the most difficult thing, is that if you're not a psychopath or a sociopath, you cannot, and it's the paradox, because what defines a sociopath or a psychopath is a lack of empathy, which means a lack of the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So think about this. Think about the logic behind it. If you are somebody who has empathy, you can't put yourself in the shoes of somebody who doesn't have empathy, because in so putting yourself in their shoes, you already have empathy.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like,
it's a logical contradiction. Yeah.
It's a logical contradiction. So it's like, of course you can't. And that's how they get by, because you always assume, see, you can't imagine what it's like to not have empathy. Because to imagine what it's like to not have empathy requires empathy. So it's already, you can't do it. It's impossible to do, right? It negates itself. And that's how they get by. That's how they get by. And so I think that's what would have been different in that whole conflict. What would have been, and I speak for myself, right? Because part of the reason why I was so, well, I'll give you I'll tell you something else that's interesting, right? You know, I said that it was actually Jimmy, right? But Enchain had asked us for a number. They had said, give us a number and we'll take it to the board, right? Give us a number and we'll take it to the board. We had a feeling that the number we would give them in order to invest in our company, that they would have said yes, right? And that we would have had to sell our company to them. Now, here's what's interesting. The very first night that we went live with CoinText, I got I forget who was the person who did, but I got a DM like, hey, I'm here in Tokyo in the bitcoin.com office with Roger. He wants to talk to you. Very first night we went live. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, have him call me. Here. Okay. So boom, like within minutes, here's a call from Roger. So I'm on the phone with Roger. He's like, hey, yeah, saw what you're doing. Love it. Like, what's it gonna take for you to be like, for this to be a bitcoin.com thing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, you know, we hadn't even really thought about this or whatever. I'd have to talk to my partners, but like, let's talk about what that looks like. Right. I was like, let's talk about what that looks like. And, you know, we had a long conversation, but ultimately what it came down to was like, what Roger wanted basically for us to hand everything over to him and become his employees. Mm-hmm. Like, become employees of bitcoin.com, and this will be a bitcoin.com project. We'll promote it, we'll do whatever, and you'll be employees. Right. So talk to my partners, and it was like, that's not what's going to happen. So we were like,
this is your baby.
Yeah. Well, here's our proposal, right? After, you know, speaking with, you know, basically it being moved over to, okay, here's who you're going to negotiate with. Here's our proposal. It stays our company. Here's our number. You know, we'd be willing to come and do, you know, if you want, we could do some additional like marketing stuff with you. Like, we could brand it as bitcoin.com, but at the end of the day, like, the code stays ours, it's ours. You know, we could do a branding deal, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Retaining control. Rejected. Right? Roger's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not, you know, no, not going to do that. Okay, fine. So again, like, there's the counterpoint. Same Roger, and then Enchain. And the thing with Enchain was it probably would have been a much more professional style deal. Seeing from what they did with everybody else, right? We wouldn't have, I mean, a lot of people got their stuff acquired in a weird way and all of that. I'm sure we could have negotiated something very, very different. Right. And probably they would have, I have a feeling that we probably actually would have gotten a larger seed investment from Enchain than we ended up getting from Yeoman's Capital. But
we know that Enchain, they just are good negotiators. So it's like hard to blame. It's hard to blame them for like getting good deals from their perspective, right? Like if they're able
from people who didn't know how to negotiate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they're the people who are like, somebody's interested in our wallet or our whatever. And it's like, oh, they're going to give us $1 million. And it's like, oh, I don't even know. What's their term sheet? Oh, it says $1 million. And they're like, sign. You know what I mean? Without reading anything, without knowing how to, organize that. But it's like, I've been through that since I was in my 20s, right? Like I've had exits from companies. I've had companies acquired, like the whole nine. But again, there's that. How is this different if Roger isn't there? How is Enchain's position even? How do they let Craig get away with the government, with the status coin thing? Right? Or is that tempered a bit? Because it really was a direct opposition to Roger, and then as a result, Amuary.
And also, like, to get on that, like, quote unquote status coin, like you and I, we both know how strict and severe the FinCEN regulations are.
Yes.
And they are, and if we are like, no, like we not really obsessed, but like we spend a lot of time looking into that and figuring out, okay, what are the new developments? What are the new things? And I could see a place where like anarchists, I wouldn't say like Roger would say that, but people would be like, why do you obsess so much about these statist laws? Like, why are you going that way? Like, why are you complying with those statist pigs?
That's totally Roger. But that's what I'm saying, where I told him, dude, this is an SEC violation.
Oh, yes.
I told him that.
Dividend tool.
What you're doing with this dividend tool, this is clearly an SEC violation. This is an unregistered security, right? Don't care. I had another I remember the weirdest conversation where he called me out of nowhere, apropos of nothing. And he's like, I've been looking. There's not enough BCH use on the dark web. Like, people are using BTC and they're using Monero, but they should be using BCH. And he was like, we need to do something about that. And I said, I'm not doing anything about that. Like, I'm not on the dark web. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't know what is being traded on the dark web. I have no reason to be there. I mean, the only time that I participated in that at all was in the early days of Silk Road out of curiosity to see what this new thing was, right? And because I had the technical chops to be able to do it at that time. Like, that was the only reason why. But for this guy to be, and I'm like, bro, you've got a company, you've got employees, you've got all this. What are you doing messing around on the dark web? What are you doing? And it's like flouting Calvin Ayre. He's got shell companies. He does all these things. He does lawsuits. He knows how to use the government.
Yeah.
And he knows how to use the state, right? But clearly he's using the state. The thing from Craig with the sure, that's good for Calvin. Like, we are completely, it's about law. You're going to be, but you never really saw Calvin throwing that out, right? You never really saw Calvin throwing that out.
And it might be very smart strategically.
Of course. Especially if you're going to do some dirt. If you're going to do some dirt, it would be good for your public persona to be like, we are super law-abiding citizens, right?
Squeaky clean. Sparkling.
Squeaky clean. That's what we do. And, to be fair, the very first thing we did with CoinText was be sure that we were regulatorily compliant. We paid more in legal fees than any other expense besides payroll at CoinText. Like legal fees, we paid a ton in legal. Everything was above board that we did. Everything. Right? And double like checked, I's dotted, T's crossed, and we're anarchists. Because we have families. Right? I'm not like, did we go overboard to like get all the licenses and everything? No, we built our software so that it was exempt. Right? That's what we paid the legal fees for, so that we didn't have to bend the knee. Right? So that we could be exempt, and if things came down, we could defend ourselves, right? Which is exactly what Calvin's doing. That's not what Roger's doing. Roger's kicking the gorilla in the nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's polarizing. Right? That's not reasonable. Even if you hold anarchist positions, libertarian positions, it's not reasonable to just be like, hey, I'm going to kick the gorilla in the nuts. And you're like, why, dude? For what reason? Because.
Yeah. Because they're evil.
Well, and, you know, I mean, they locked him up.
Yeah.
Right. And he's holding they put him in federal prison. And he renounced his citizenship because of that. He's holding a huge grudge. He's got a gigantic chip on his shoulder. And again, like that's polarizing. Right. So it's like there's the polarization. So then, I mean, we've spent a lot of time on this, but it's like then you get to the eCash split. Right. And it's like, okay, in that one, Roger's role as a polarizing figure is really blatantly obvious. You know, in the lead up, all of the things, and like his idea that he deserves to call the shots, you know, on this one, I was heavily involved. Like I was heavily involved in the behind the scenes things that were going on during this time, heavily involved. And the first thing was this chain limit. And forget about the technicalities of, oh, we need to increase the chain limit. The only application that was having any problems was Satoshi Dice.
Yes.
That was it.
And was also memo.cash, but
who cares? Who cares? Doesn't matter. Right? Doesn't matter. Like what mattered was Satoshi Dice, which Roger was secretly like Roger, Bitcoin.com ran Satoshi Dice. May still, may not. It may not be, you know, officially Bitcoin.com. They do have the Bitcoin.com casino, right? So they do run these casino games. Right? That's a part of that's a revenue stream for them. But Satoshi Dice, Roger's been running Satoshi Dice on BCH, right? So Roger steps in. ABC's got to increase this thing. Like, why does ABC got to increase this? Well, Satoshi Dice, right? That's the reason why, which is Roger's thing. So you've got to do it for me.
Mm.
And then it's like, well, this is going to cost a lot. It's going to be very difficult to do. Like, this can't just be done. And Roger's whole thing is, well, no, you should do it for the community. It needs to be done because Satoshi Dice, so basically like for free. So here's this guy with all this money. It needs to be done for free, right? And I mediated the call between Bitcoin.com and ABC. Like, it could be argued, and I think there are certain people, maybe Anthony Zegers might back me up on this, because I think it was actually him that said, it might be said that I'm the reason that it even got to 50. But it might be said that because there were two calls in the initial calls. Roger left the first call and Amuary left the second. Just said, I'm done. They just started going, and it was like, I'm done, hang up. Right? And it wasn't until Stefan Rust, right, took over. Roger wasn't there. And I remember because I was on the treadmill at the gym, and we got to the point where it's like, well, what would it take to get it to 50? It was 25. What would it take to get it to 50? Right? And what does Bitcoin.com have to pay? And they didn't want to pay. Right? It's like, you're the ones asking for this and you don't want to pay. And then Roger went on this whole thing where he was like, I've given ABC all this money when he hadn't. I don't know if you remember that. He was trying to say, oh, I've paid ABC, I've given ABC. And Amuary was like, you ain't given us squat. And he brought out these numbers and it was like, yeah, that wasn't to us, Roger. Well, but I donated to the thing. And it's like, no, that went to everybody. Like, you've never given us anything, right? But these other miners had. And Roger's signing on to the thing about the treasury and then saying, no, I didn't. They just put my name. He's a liar. And I know he's a liar because he had stepped into that elevator with me in 2018 and was giddy about the same concept. So for him to say the same people signing a document a year later, because it was 2019, February.
Yeah, we have to talk about that. That was Zhang Zhuo, right?
Zhang Zhuo was the one who brought it up, but it was signed by Jihan Wu, signed by Roger. Who else signed it? Who's via BTC?
Hypo
Yang.
Hypo Yang.
Yang. Right. So it was signed by all those guys to say, let's do, and they were the ones who called it the IFP, the Infrastructure Funding Plan or whatever, proposal, I think they called it at that time. It was signed by Roger. And I believe it was signed by Roger again, because he was at that meeting in 2018 and he walked into that elevator giddy. He was always about that proposal. He was always about it. But then he saw RBTC and all his people come out so much against it, and he flipped. He wasn't the only one. Ronald Fuchsball too. Ronald helped write it. He helped write that proposal and then flipped into somebody who by the end was trash talking Amuary and saying he was a thief who wanted to steal and all of these things. Right? Because, oh, here's this public sentiment of the community, right? And for Roger, it became all about ego. Right? And I've got to have these people supporting because it's important. It became important to his business, but I think it ultimately became important to, he didn't want to make more enemies. Right? He wanted to still have his faction because, if these people abandon me, right? So it was, if everybody would have said, this is a good idea, Roger would have been like, yeah, I'm for it. Let's do it. And then there would have been no opposition.
Because what people were saying is that Amuary is like this big divisive figure who's like just trying to stir trouble and so forth. But that's all projection. That's all projection.
It's not Amuary at all. I can tell you, man, like, so I mean, it's history. It's history. So I can talk about it. Like, I mediated private conversations between Roger Ver and Amuary. It was just Roger Ver, Amuary, and me. Right? Actually, the first time, he was the first person to find out that that they were going to implement the Coinbase rule. Right? He was the first person to find out, like, we're going to announce that we're going to do this. First person. Right? On a phone call with me. Right? And I was the one who reached out and was like, let's have a phone call with Amuary. He's like, what is it about? I said, let's just have a phone call. He's like, tell me what it is. I said, it's about the IFP. He said, are they going to do it? I was like, between you and me, yes, let's have a phone call. He's like, look, here's the deal. There's a whole bunch of us. And then, on the phone call, he said this. He's like, why don't we just pay you to leave, to go away? He said, I've got a whole bunch of people involved. There's a whole bunch of us. We're just willing to put funds together. Tell us what it will take for you to just walk away and never work on Bitcoin again. That was how he led that conversation.
Wow.
Like, you should just leave. What will it take for us to basically pay you to never work on Bitcoin? Just scrap ABC and just walk away. That's how he led that conversation. Right? No negotiation, no compromise, no nothing. And then he wanted to go on and talk about, I forget.
Well, and imagine the lack of empathy. Like, for Amuary Sechet, and I know that because I talked to him personally. Like, for him, Bitcoin Cash is still his child. It's a child that rejected him. That's like, no, you are not my real father. But he still views it that way. He still is like, no, it's so sad what's happening there. I like, because I feel a little bit of like almost like revenge joy, because it's not really my, like, it's like, okay, I joined there and then they kicked me out and like, okay, whatever. Like it's like a former employee almost. But for Amuary, it's a very different perspective.
But look at it like this. This is what I found at that moment. I was like, the lack of self-awareness, because it's like this. So what you're saying is you will fund somebody to fork my software, and you will pay for that. You will pay for someone to fork my software and develop it. You will pay me to stop working on my software, but you wouldn't give a penny while we needed the money and we were operating the network this whole time. What an insult. What an insult. Right? It's like, wow, dude, seriously? Like at that point, you're a scumbag. You're an absolute scumbag. So it's like, oh, so had I just gone along, it would have been a free ride for you this whole time. Right? Had I done what you wanted. So you will only put out money when I don't do what you want. But when I do what you want, you won't give me a penny. Because you're, why buy the cow when you could get the milk for free? Right? So the idea that you would pay someone to stop working after you had stolen their thing and then you would pay the thieves is incredible. It's so incredible that someone would do that.
It's unbelievable.
Again,
like you have to
isn't
be,
it?
Right? Like I could never, ever, like it's very hard to put myself in the mindset of that. Like you have to be really out just to spite people a lot.
Well, and then you look at like this, and this is something I haven't talked about, right? But it's like, I mean, I was there. The thing happened. So I'm not talking out of school. And it's like, it's probably something that people should know if they're going to continue to associate with this thing that now Roger is very much in control of. Clearly, like if you're so in control, think about that for a minute, that your personal gambling debts can basically take down an entire like chain, an entire project, your personal gambling debts, right? The result of that is that it takes it down.
Smart BCH.
Smart BCH, which was like the thing, because without Smart BCH, what is BCH? And if you look, the other thing that's interesting,
just a worse version of eCash.
Look at all the people who, and I've been looking at this, like look at all the people who were the anti-Amuary clique, right? All that go down the list, right? Who were all the people who were the most vehemently, we got to get him off this chain. He's so bad for this thing. Where are they? They all left. They vanished. They don't interact with BCH. They don't build on BCH. They're gone. Right? And Roger backed them all. He backed them all. Right? All the things that they did. And it's like, again, you think, because who's still around? Amuary's still around.
Mm-hmm.
Who's still building every day? Who's still working? Never stopped.
I see every commit. And it's always
every
like,
commit.
That'll nix.
He's still working. He's still working. And so you say, what happens if Roger doesn't insert himself in this? Even if Roger just simply says, I'm out. I'm out. I'm not going to voice my opinion on this. Right? Or even if he just stands by that signature. Even if he has, even if he stands on principle. So you shall know them by their fruits. If you want to know whether or not everything I've said, if somebody is listening to this and they're like, Vin's just salty. Now, first off, the things that I've said here, and if people know anything about me, I couldn't make any of these things up. Like, if you're listening to the things that I'm saying, go send it to a body language person, okay? And send it to somebody who knows how to read and tell if somebody's being deceptive. These things happened. Every single thing that I'm telling you happened. I was a personal eyewitness to every single thing. I have sugarcoated nothing. I have embellished nothing. Every single one of these things happened. So then think about the things that I have said, and then think about the person who now, because of their personal gambling debts, if you're somebody with funds on CoinFlex, you don't have your money because this dude has personal gambling debts that Mark Lamb trusted him that he would be able to pay off if he went millions of dollars into arrears, that he would like make everybody, that he would make them whole, something that Calvin Ayre did for people, right? And he hasn't done it. And when you look at the whole story like that, it's like, yep, that's who he is. That's where you're going to end up. That's where you're going to end up.
Now, the bigger question is, how could it play for so long, right? Like, why were you and I kind of like playing along for how long we did?
Our own egos. That's the answer. At the end of the day, that's it. But that's even why Calvin played along, right? Because Calvin, like Craig, is already hated, right? But he's his thing. Like Craig is Calvin's project. I don't know what you want to call it. He's an integral part of the whole. Calvin's, it's a sunk cost fallacy. Calvin's invested a lot of money in the whole Craig story. Okay, it's one of the things that he's running. It's part of the game that he's doing. So he's got sunk costs. Even Calvin played along with Roger because, okay, yes, BTC, they already hate Craig, so we're not going to get in there. They're already enemies, right? Roger, though, validates Calvin and Craig. So thus the pictures of them doing cheers with wine and hanging out, and the yacht party. The yacht party is about a picture where Roger Ver is in the picture. That's what it's about, right?
And that picture goes around all the time. You see it all the time.
All the time. The parties, like, because Roger and I and others are in those videos, but really Roger and me, right? And I know that because, like, even the things where it was just solo me, those are put private. This slick, I mean, the production value of the stuff that they were doing, was incredible, right? And the money that was being shelled out. And what was it for? It was social capital entering into the crypto scene, right? Jihan spoke at the thing. He had brought all of these people to speak. And it was all about that we would get up on stage and say, thank you to Calvin Ayre and thank you to CoinGeek and how and this and this. And I did, right? On the video. Why? There's this incredible party that he's throwing with, like, it's just insane, right? Putting me on a yacht and free flowing champagne. And this is incredible and first class. Of course, you know, as a socially aware person, you know that your job is, here comes the camera. CoinGeek is the best, you know, Calvin Ayre is the man. Like, that's it. It's the cosign, right? That's what he's buying. Okay. It's not free. And that's what Roger represented until Roger became a liability. Because it's like, we need to do this in a certain way. I have a way, I've got a way of operating. I can't be an anarchist. We can't be, they were like businesses, like all of this. And you start to see Craig just took it too far, because that's what Craig does. But you start to see that narrative dialed back is a good narrative. Like, we're business friendly, which means we follow the regulations. We're not going to break the law. Calvin knows he's not going back on that 10 most wanted. He's not going to have his money confiscated again. He knows what that feels like, to have millions of dollars confiscated, right? So you start going back. You go back to Blockstream, and it's like, oh man, Adam Back had suggested himself that we would be at 8 megs, but they're still at 1 meg. Why is that? The answer is Roger.
And if someone would start talking about 2 meg blocks on BTC, I can guarantee that Roger would step in and be like, see guys, I told you all the time, and it would be dead within the minute
they can't do it. They can't. Now, maybe they can start to do it now because people like Nick Carter are going to kill the maxi cult. Right. And as they call themselves, Bitcoin's immune system. Immune system against what? Against
peer-to-peer electronic cash. Oh yeah.
Against Roger.
Against Roger.
Because who else is the enemy? Right? It's even bcash. It's that bcash is Roger coin. It's all Roger. It's all Roger. Right? Even they believe, you know, you talk to somebody who's not even a maxi, their narrative, like who's the girl, the British girl who was, I think you did Liberty Lockdown, and he had her, and then he had you and Amuary. I'm forgetting her name. I'm spacing it. It's not even important. It's
Laura something. I forgot the name.
It's seriously not important. Even she, and she's not a maxi. She's just an establishment, normal, you know. So you can't go too far from the maxi line because you don't want to have a target on your back, right? The cyber hornets or whatever. But even she's like, then Roger started BCH. You know, which is not true. He didn't want BCH. He wanted the BTC ticker because he believed he should be the one calling the shots. It should be his way. So it's like, no, 2 megs now, then 4 megs in 2 years, and 8 megs 4 years from now. Not good enough. Not good enough for me. And it's like, bro, we would have been there. We would have been there, and the maxis never would have, there would be no maxi cult. And it's just, even from that first experience, you know, my first experience of Roger Ver in person is him running in to a panel that he missed. He was scheduled to be on it, and he just either spaced it or flaked. And him running in and grabbing a microphone and then basically taking over the whole thing in a very rude way from out in the audience, right? And trying to shame Tone Vase. Now, Tone Vase deserves to be shamed, and I've done it myself. I've shamed him myself, right? He's somebody who deserves to be shamed. Did he at that point? Was he as toxic at that point? No. No, he wasn't. He wasn't as bad. And we were all on the, we were all on the same chain. Right? But after that, imagine somebody does that to you. What's going to be your feeling about them from then on out? They're an enemy.
Yeah, because you can explain to someone that they're wrong without turning them, making them look like an idiot. Like if someone can
in front of an audience full of people on a panel that they were invited to be on,
especially
at a conference that they were invited to.
The bet is like it's just like, hey, I'm rich, you're poor. That's basically the argument.
That's exactly what he was doing. That's exactly what he was doing. And that's just like, again, that right there is such bad form, especially if you have the money. And you know what? That's not the first time Roger's done that. There's many public instances of him doing that playing that same game with people. And it's like, all right, well, with all those bets you made, right? Maybe you could pay back the $47 million you owe. Right? That's because here's what I figured. Now I'm seeing, okay, you made the bet, Roger, but would you have actually paid them if you lost?
Nice.
Because it seems like well, it's not a question mark, because we know what happens when Roger loses a bet, because that's a gambling debt.
And that was with his friends, kind of.
With his friends.
With his own community, with his own
community.
Partners. Yeah.
That massively affects all kinds of stuff. Right? So it's like, oh, wow, you wouldn't have actually paid Tone off. when Segwit did activate. You wouldn't have actually paid Tobias. But there you go. Like, you would have expected him to pay you, and you wanted to embarrass him.
Yeah. And it does nothing. Like, what does it actually accomplish if you do this bet?
Oh, it
if
did
you
do
win,
something.
If you lose, well, it helps his ego.
Well, no, I mean, win or lose, it was the making the bet that did something. It started the polarization.
Yeah.
Because Tobias has, I don't know if he still does. I never see him around, but maybe I'm blocked by him or something. But he had a platform. At that time, he had like, in terms of respect, there were a lot of, I mean, it was all BTC. He was gaining a lot of respect from people. You know, he was making a name for himself. People wanted to hear from him at that time. They saw him as an authority. So it's like, wow. And he became one of the biggest enemies of Roger.
Mm.
One of the biggest vocal public adversaries of Roger. And by extension, Bitcoin Cash. Like, had Roger not come over to Bitcoin Cash, again, might have been totally different. Like, actually, a whole bunch of people from BTC probably would have migrated their way over to BCH because there wouldn't have been all this political baggage. Because Amuary hadn't. Project. Yes. They would be able to look at it for what it was in the way that I looked at it. Right? Like, oh, yeah, okay, that works. I can move my stuff over there. But part of it was, I knew even at that moment, like, well, this means, and again, it's interesting. It's interesting because I can go back to this moment because I remember having this conversation with Mate, I'm forgetting his last name, over at bitcoin.com, like their business development guy, right? About when they had said, like, maybe Cointext could come over and be a bitcoin.com thing. So he was the one I was negotiating with. The number that we gave them, we specifically said, the reason this number is what it is because of the cost we will incur becoming a part of bitcoin.com and associated with Roger, because Roger is so toxic at this moment. His reputation, it will mean us being shunned from, like, a lot of BTC people because Roger is so hated. Now it's coming back to me that I remember this specifically, that it's like, it has to be this high. Like, we're not negotiating. And the reason we're not negotiating is because what this potentially costs us in terms of our reputation moving forward in Bitcoin.
Wow. And that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this was January of 2018. So this is 5 months after the split. That soon.
Wow.
That soon, it was already like, so that means that in the lead up, because sometimes it's hard to remember what to really have a concrete sort of be able to quantify the level of certain things. But I distinctly recall us being like, well, this is the cost, right? We have to take this much because this is what it's going to cost us. It's going to shut us out of other possible opportunities because it's Roger. Right? So it's like, okay, something to think about, right? In terms of, because how do we start? Comes full circle. What does it cost you? What's the cost? Like, what's the drop in value? It costs you a lot. It costs you a lot. Like, if the idea of big block Bitcoin, BCH, BSV, eCash, the entire vision is use, right? So you go down the line, right? Use in commerce, use by business, use with applications, use as the meta net, whatever you want. It's about use, not hodl. Supposed to be. But when you have a character that is are people going to want to use BCH, or services associated with BCH, knowing that they're funded by Roger, knowing that this thing funded by Roger is now preventing them, like stole from them, basically. Stole from them.
Yeah.
So everybody being like, Roger's a scammer and BCH is going to steal your coins. Roger's going to steal your coins. They were right. They were right.
It hurts to say that, because like we were like defending against that, kind of like, no, like how is he supposed to steal the coins? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like it's a logic contradiction. No,
you know what's funny?
It's true.
Roger has stole more coins from people than Craig.
Why? Oh, we just know the
Craig's
number.
Craig's never stole $47 million worth of coins from anybody.
Yeah, that's true.
Craig still hasn't even moved Satoshi's coins.
Yeah, despite announcing.
Right? They're trying to. They will try to. Right? But
and
think
it'll be
about
a disaster for crypto, but yeah.
Think about that for a minute. They were right. They were all right. Roger is a scammer. He as of right now, Roger Ver is responsible for he stole their coins. How do we say he stole their coins? Because he basically entered into agreement where this company that he invested in, and he's a shareholder in it, he got them to agree, which of course they would have to agree, right? This is an investor. This is the person who brought the other investors. He led all their rounds. Hey, give me a non-collateralized position, right? Float me a loan, stake me.
I'll pay you back.
I'll pay you back. I'm good for it. That was a lie. And they used, in order to stake him, they had to use the coins of the people who had deposited on their exchange. So Roger took the coins of the people on the exchange, an exchange that he is an investor in, so it's his exchange, used it to gamble, lost the money, won't pay it back. That's theft. Sorry. That's theft.
Yeah.
There's not another way to describe it. That's theft.
And you are not an anarchist anymore.
Well, you could still be an anarchist, but now you're a criminal.
Yeah.
Like, even under an anarchist libertarian framework, don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. You took their stuff, Roger. And not only did you, and everybody knows you took their stuff, and now you say, no, I don't owe you your stuff.
You owe me.
You owe me. Incredible. Incredible. And that even has to be the end. Like, it's the spiritual end of BCH.
Yes. Yes. Because a lot of it hinged on Roger being kind of Bitcoin Jesus. I mean, he always hated that label, but
that was the nickname.
Yeah.
So it's like, turns out he was the Bitcoin Antichrist. It's the spiritual end of BCH. And like, of course, I need to pat myself on the back a little bit, because honestly, the first thing is, I won't pat myself on the back. I'll be like, it's good discernment. I'm going to say that's a blessing from God, right? Good discernment that the people that Roger founded were as corrupt as I believe them to be. And I saw the actions that they were taking, which included smart BCH and focusing on that and changing the chain around so that things could happen on smart BCH, right? Like the chain was, yep. Though a lot of that was for smart BCH, in the same way that Segwit was for Lightning Network, which it even says so in the BIP. In the Segwit BIP, it says, what will this enable? Lightning Network. Says it right there. And so it's like, you know, I saw that. I said, I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I was like, this is corrupt. It's out of control. That people are doing absurd things, so I'm out. Right? When this thing happens in May, I'm out. Something bad is going to happen. I can't have my name associated with this. Right? And even better to make a public, like, I'm out. And the reason and I brought up Roger's name. in my little announcement of why I'm out, I was like, there's a few people that I think I only named 2 people that were problems. One of them who's on the lam from African authorities, and Roger. So this is where it goes full circle, dude. Like, it's not about, they're like, well, it can affect the software, you know, and the hardware, and it's like, yeah, that's true, but Bitcoin's not that. There's a spiritual component to it.
Bitcoin is only what's in here. Like, that's the only thing that matters. That's why BTC is so valuable. Bitcoin's BTC software is way worse than ABC software. And I know that because I read the code. The code is objective. Like, if you measure it, if you look at the way they do commits, it's worse. If I do compare them. It is worse. ABC is doing a better job. Like, maybe that's controversial, but I have metrics to back that up.
Well, I would tell you, it's not in the head, though. It's not in the head. The head is after. It's in the heart. And I'll tell you how I know it's in the heart and not in the head, because in the head, I'll tell you why. If it was in the head, you wouldn't have BTC saying number goes up when you hold the coins and BCH saying number goes up when you spend the coins, if it was in the head. Because if it was in the head, you would be able to rationally come to, like, one of these is right. Here's the numbers, you know, all of this. This is what's right. Anybody who's rational will believe this. It would be like round earth, flat earth. Right? To where you're like, if you believe the flat earth, you're crazy. Right? But it's not that. It's not that. It's like both of them, you can rationalize your way to them if you want to believe it beforehand. It's
about, you said that it's about the end times. How did you call it? It's about what will this... No. How did you say eschatology? The eschatology. It's about what will this look like in 100 years, and the two visions there differ. And it's in your, but it's what's here, right? It's what's in your heart. And that's why I say it's more important that you see the spiritual end of BCH than that it's not the price. Like this, you can't see the spiritual end happening. Right? We just like what people should see is, like, in this space, you know, the moves are abrupt. When we have the crashes, they happen in like a week. And it seems to come out of nowhere. That's an indication of something that's moving with spirit. Because with spirit, it's like things are normal, things are normal, things are normal, things are normal. Boom, what was that? Right? What was that? Out of nowhere. And it's just the corruption reaching a crescendo, because it's like, it's the foundation. It's like if your house is full of termites. Oh, it just collapses at some point.
At a certain point, the threshold has been reached. What they say, the straw that broke the camel's back. And that they're referencing a spiritual thing, right? When they say, that was it, man. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I had to quit at this company. It's like all the way up to there, you can take it.
And it's fine.
And it's fine. And you can't intellectualize yourself to, well, if there's 5 more times of my boss yelling at me, right? It's not that, because it's also built up on what happened the day before, and this other thing that's out here, and this car that like cut you off in traffic this day, and had they not done that, you wouldn't have, and you know, you were feeling not so well, you didn't get to sleep because the dog was barking of your neighbor, and this is the spiritual realm.
It's a revelation.
Exactly. Like this is something that's happening.
That's why you see a lot of like Christian converts. They're like sinful and evil and whatever, and then at some point you're like, it stops, and they just turn around completely. It's a very common story. It's a transformation, right? It's an immediate, like, we are transformed. And, you know,
but the straw that broke the camel's back is just the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like the load that's on the camel, you know that it's too much way before the straw that breaks the camel's back. Not only that, you see the person continue to load. You're like, wait. That's all over there. Are you going to stop loading? No. Right? And so that's me. That's what I saw. It's like, wait a minute. This is really piled up. Are you going to stop loading now? That's what I was waiting for on BCH to see. Did they stop loading? Because they're acting like Amuary. The whole thing was Amuary's the problem. If he's gone, we'll stop loading. We'll stop doing these shenanigans. He's the reason we're doing the shenanigans. And it's like, oh, okay, well, let's see. Okay, he left. Shenanigans. Worse shenanigans.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this never would have cracked off if Amuary was still here.
Amuary was not the river, he was the dam.
He was the dam. He was the dam. And he was holding back Roger's bad decisions. To a great degree, he was holding back Roger's bad decisions, just like Calvin was holding back Roger's bad decisions, just like Blockstream was holding back Roger's bad decisions. And then eventually it gets to the point where it's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
But
and you just look and you're like,
this also means that, like, just from that, we know that the crypto price of these assets will never be stable, because there'll always be these events. And the same goes in the other direction. Like the same goes in like, oh no, this is, everybody realizes, holy shit, this is the thing. And it just goes up and it shoots up and everybody is talking about it.
Well, the shooting up, that's what's so interesting. The shooting up is predicated on the same people who make it crash. So you got to ask the question of like, so the Mt. Gox thing. Remember, Roger was there for that crash. He was he's the remembered figure of that crash. Because he got on, Mt. Gox was insolvent. People should have been making a bank run and withdrawing their stuff. He could have just stayed totally quiet. He could have said nothing. What does he do? He gets on and makes a video saying, I've gone to Mt. Gox. I've looked at the books. They're totally solvent. They'll be able to pay you off, blah, 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 blah. And like 2 days later, stopping withdrawals. Nobody can get their money. Still to this day, nobody's got their money. And it's Roger. And that was part of the reason why, see, people remembered in the big block lead up, there were already people that didn't trust him because of that moment. Right? People forget about that it's like some of the people who were anti-Roger in the split lost their money on Mt. Gox. They believed him.
And then you hold a grudge.
Well, and then you're just like, I'm not believing you again. Like,
just
you're
like
not
you don't believe him. Like, there's still people who believe him. Like, I talk to people and they're like, no, I rather trust Roger. Like, obviously, I'd rather trust Roger. And we were at that point, somewhere along the timeline. But like now we are this Mt. Gox people, right?
I mean, at a certain point, but it's like the same people who are responsible for it going up are the same people who are responsible for it crashing. So, prime example, Michael Saylor. Right? Michael Saylor. It's like, because what they do is they introduce the spiritual poison. They introduce the cancer. As a matter of fact, I've got tweets from when he was first doing his thing where I called him cancer. Right? And I've shared them. I said, his tweets are cancer. Like, and I meant it. And it turned out they were. They were. Because it got a whole bunch of people to do things that they should not have done.
But his stuff is like, I didn't pay attention to him because I saw some of his tweets and it was just like, okay, this guy's insane. I'm not going to spend any brain cycles whatsoever in him. But it turns out that he really, really misled people way worse than I've seen other people do that. Like, he told people to sell anything that can be sold and buy Bitcoin. Like, he said that explicitly.
Mortgage their house.
Mortgage your house.
Their house. Imagine if you're somebody who listened to Michael Saylor. Do you know how many people, like, even in my private, even in like Counter Markets, Bitcoin Mystery School, there were people who wanted to argue with me during that run up. Like people who I'm like, no, haven't you've been following our newsletter? You've been in Bitcoin Mystery School? And they were like, no, really, you should like get your Bitcoin and then like borrow against it and all of this, and it'll always go up, and all of this is a Saylor this and Saylor that. And I was like, seriously, this is no, like, do not do this. You don't understand. I'm not saying this because I'm a hater. I'm telling you, this is like, you'll ruin your life if you follow what this guy is saying. Like, if you really did what he's suggesting to you right now, you're going to be in such a bad situation not that long from now. Like, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, like this year. Like, within 365 days, you're going to be wrecked. Right? You're gonna hate this man. And it was just a cavalcade of that. But once you open the floodgates to it, there it is. And it makes you look back and be like, wow, like, Lightning Network, it doesn't work, right? Why does Lightning exist? Roger. Roger. Hold on. Let me turn on the lights here. Hold on.
You look much brighter.
What's that?
Oh, I said, you look much brighter.
Oh, now I still don't hear you. What did you say?
Now it's getting lame. I said, you look much brighter.
Oh, I'm much brighter. Yes. I mean, Lightning exists because Roger, right? It was because there had to be a small block answer.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, we have to be small blocks, but now we have to find what's the answer, right? It's like, it couldn't be, at first they were saying it was going to be just Segwit would fix it. Like, Lightning Network was sort of like the plan B if Segwit doesn't fix everything, right? It's like lightning, we're going to do lightning. That became the thing. But why did they have to go down that route? Because the original Adam Back thing, they'd already be at 8 megs. They would have never needed lightning. Adam Back was actually suggesting a layer 1 solution. Right? Why does Lightning? But then you look at Lightning and it's like, well, the system itself is a boondoggle, but there's still people working. They want to use Bitcoin in commerce. They actually do want to use Bitcoin in commerce. But they need to.
This is why we have Lightning. They need to have a story. Yeah.
They have to have a story, but they actually do want to use it in commerce, but they just want to use it in commerce not with big blocks, because they've already married themselves to that shelling point, if you will, that we can do whatever we want, but we cannot have big blocks.
We cannot have Roger. We cannot have Roger.
We cannot agree with Roger, because that would be like morally, that would be heresy. We cannot agree with the heretic. So we don't have any other solution, and they won't have any other solution. So we have to rock this Lightning thing. But look, Lightning in El Salvador, they really got a country. Now, again, complete failure because it's rotten at the core, but it does indicate that there's a whole bunch of smart people who want to use Bitcoin in commerce and are trying to build, like Jack Mallers, right? If they had big block Bitcoin, he wouldn't be building on Lightning. He would be doing the things that we're doing on layer 1. It's just, you go through and you look at every single thing, and it's like, wow, this is the problem. This guy's the problem.
So here's the big question. What do we learn for eCash?
Yes.
How can we create Bitcoin? How can we revive? I mean, the spirit is alive in eCash, and you can feel it. Yes. There is a spirit, and it's going and it's growing, you know, having shrinks and grows. Is there something we can learn from all of these years to apply for eCash?
The Coinbase rule was the learning. I think the big learning is, well, this is something that Ryan X. Charles said. You know, he's an unfortunate, he's one of those unfortunate characters in Bitcoin who got lulled in by Craig and believing Craig was Satoshi, and he's you know,
he co-authored the SLP spec, which we have two very big champions.
Not only did he co-author the SLP spec, he wrote Bitcore, not Bcash node, but Bitcore, the BitPay. Like, you go through and look at Bitcore, the early commits are from him. A lot of the BIP70 stuff is him. Like, he's an unsung hero of Bitcoin who got pulled in by Craig Wright, right? Got sucked in. You know, I don't know, something, you know, whatever's going on with him, God bless him. Like, I hope, you know, he's a sensitive guy who has had issues dealing with
and how
things,
does it relate to the Coinbase rule?
This is how it relates, because he said, there was something that he said where he's said a lot of very wise things, a lot of very dumb things, but a lot of very wise things. And he said, you fix things in Bitcoin with Bitcoin. And that stuck with me because it's right. It's correct. Like, if there's a problem in Bitcoin, you fix it with Bitcoin. Right? Any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. Right? We have the means. That's what we learned. The Coinbase rule is the first iteration of, there was a problem in Bitcoin and it was fixed with Bitcoin. It wasn't fixed, Bitcoin meaning fixed with the protocol and the incentives, not fixed with giving you UTXOs that have gained in value because you've hodled them, and so you have some external wealth. No, fixed with Bitcoin moving forward. If you have a problem in Bitcoin, the problem that you have is with incentives. Period.
Yeah.
It's like, so how do you get the incentives aligned? Right? What are the proper incentives long term? And there are going to always be people who have bad ideas, and the incentives should weed them out. And the Coinbase rule did that. Clearly, it did that, right? Because think about it. Because everybody who, instead of seeing it as, well, this is aligning incentives, instead said, this is a tax. This is tax coin.
They don't believe in Bitcoin.
Amuary's a bad person. They don't believe in Bitcoin. Because it's like, okay. Because what was their solution? Well, it should be funded by flip starters. It should be funded by community funds. Okay, but where does how does that use the protocol? It doesn't. It uses UTXOs. Maybe. Because I'm sure some of that funding was in USD or maybe some other cryptocurrencies or whatever, paying developers bills. And it's like, well, no, fix it. If there are problems in Bitcoin, fix it with Bitcoin. Ryan X. Charles, right? Perfect. Credit due to him. So what do we learn? We learn that if there's problems, if there's things you want, it's because the incentives are misaligned. How do you get the incentives aligned? That may be something in the code. That may be something outside of the code. It may be in the way that you organize the stuff that you're doing. But it's like, how do you align the incentives such that people behave themselves? And how do you maximize the good ideas? How do you, even more importantly, how do you punish the bad ideas? Because that's something that's never happened to Roger. That's one of the reasons he was able to stick around. What was his punishment?
Really punished.
What was his punishment for the Mt. Gox thing? No punishment. Reputational, but that's not fixing it with Bitcoin.
Well, it just
Right?
makes him it seems like reputational damage just makes him stronger, like more fervent.
Well, then that is a really misaligned incentive. Then you have a big problem because now this person is actually incentivized to make bad decisions.
Yeah, causes much trouble over time, and yeah, and you can see that a little bit. It seems almost like, okay, let's you call it the kicking the gorilla in the nuts. Like that's the incentive.
Dude, that's I mean that's what we learn. That's what we could take away and learn in eCash. This is where it would be wonderful if people could get their minds there. But the good part about eCash, the brilliant part about the Coinbase rule, is that, and we'll see if the Global Network Council is ever properly implemented, because the idea behind that is to also have properly aligned incentives. We don't know if it's right. It can always be altered, right, by the people involved. So it's a moving target in a way, but it's a start. But even if it is never properly, even if it's never properly implemented, or I say properly, even if it's never implemented in the way that it was initially designed, let's put it like that, which a lot of people will never know the way that it was initially designed, because the blog posts about that and all the things about it have been deleted. So that's interesting in and of itself. But even if it's never ever implemented, still the fact that, you know, the direction of the chain and the price going up or down, bitcoinABC, if the price goes up, you know, is rewarded. And from their decisions, if their decisions make the price go up, they're rewarded. If their decisions make the price go down, they're punished directly.
Yes.
Immediately.
And they feel it, and they really feel it.
They really
changes their decision making. I felt that.
Yes.
I was like, okay, here's a really good proposal. Like, this is a great proposal. We don't have the money.
So the hope is, right? The hope is that they don't, and this is why it would be nice if the Global Network Council was actually implemented, because the risk is that there is a huge risk to try to do things to make number go up that are not about decisions that are made relative to development work, which is what their 50% is supposed to go to. Their 50% is supposed to be about development work, right? Maybe a little bit of marketing, maybe these type of things that go along with the ABC company, but it's not meant to be the type of things that have been done in other chains, the types of things that Roger did in terms of like trying to pump the coin, or Calvin has done with the propaganda of CoinGeek, or Dash has done with, you know, sponsoring one of the Baldwin brothers and Max Kaiser to have a Dash wrapped bus and go around the country on a reality show, which they did, by the way. That's not like a false thing. They actually, that came out of the Dash treasury. Or, you know, these types of things, which didn't make the price go up. Right? It still is correlated. It's all correlated to BTC. A rising tide lifts all boats. When BTC goes up, everybody goes up. You know, maybe you get a little variation, but lay the charts on top of each other. It's the same chart, right? So you can't, these things don't make your coin decouple from BTC. eCash is not going to decouple from BTC. Like on custodial markets, on CoinMarketCap, it will not. If we can get some DeFi things happening on chain, especially between, let's say, some tokens that don't exist off the chain, that so in other words, that aren't traded on custodial markets off the chain, right? Then everything can be decoupled. Everything can be decoupled, and we saw this with Spice.
All right, let's dig into that a little. Do you still, how much time do you still?
I've got time. We're good.
All right.
Yeah,
awesome.
they're I think the fam's staying out late. Whatever.
All right. So this was a very, very big introduction to like it was a synopsis of the history of crypto from one perspective of
Yes.
eCash, like the entire
Yes.
legacy. Why, like what was
Of
the
one
big
man,
threat?
one man's
One
story.
man. Yes. So now for something completely different, which is totally related. You recently tweeted that you're coining the term NEX, like non-custodial exchange.
Yep.
And why do you think we already got the term DEX, which is a decentralized exchange? And I talked to, I was at the barbecue in Liechtenstein like 2 days or 3 days from before, 3 days before yesterday, whatever, like 2 days before yesterday. And I met someone who was like, we are the first fully regulated DEX.
See?
And I was like firing a question, because I was like, what is this? But he was like, basically, and he was being honest, we're a centralized exchange, except we don't hold the coins, right? And
so that would be a NEX. That would be a non-custodial exchange.
Yes, kind of, right? So
that's the non-custodial. That's a non-custodial exchange. Yeah.
But they do the sushi swap style. They probably hold the. Probably what they meant is that you like we don't have really the we don't have access to your keys. You have your keys, but the coins are in our smart contract.
Oh well, that's custodial.
From a FinCEN perspective, that is custodial.
Yeah, from a regulatory, a regulatory standpoint, that's custodial. But see, they're calling smart contracts decentralized. That's the lie about the DEX, about the most of what everybody calls a decentralized exchange, like Sushi Swap or even 0x protocol. It doesn't matter. The decentralized part, the word means nothing now because it just means put it on a smart contract and it's decentralized. And it's like, there are chains out there that are proof of authority chains. So meaning federated group of validators. So it's totally centralized.
Well, then the federal government of America is decentralized.
That's what I'm saying.
And it is.
Like you're not decentralized. Like the Senate, I try to explain this to people. Like there's a difference between distributed and decentralized. What they really mean is we're a distributed exchange. Like you could hit any node, any Ethereum node.
Maybe I prefer permissionless, where it's like, okay, you can just join.
Yeah, that's fine. Permissionless, whatever. But it's not decentralized. There still is a central authority, right? The central authority is that contract, right? And so you're not going to get outside of, you're never going to have exchanges that are completely outside of a central authority. And you probably don't you probably don't want to have zero authority involved in your exchanges. What do I mean? Okay. You and I can go out, like you could be here in Saipan. I could go on, we do the classifieds on Facebook groups. I could go on a Facebook group. You're selling something, right? Let's say you're selling your car. I'm going to go and I'm going to buy your car. I'm going to pay USD. I'm going to pay cash. I'm going to go buy your car. Okay. So we're going to do a peer-to-peer exchange. But it's not like there's no authority involved. Because if you just, you've sold me this car and then all of a sudden, like the things you've told me about the car or whatever, or, you give me a fake title to the car, or, you don't represent the things
basically
that
I scam you.
Yeah, I can take you to court. I can call the police. That's an authority. So there's I have a recourse to an authority, right? So really what a non-custodial exchange does is it time shifts the role of that authority, but it still is in a peer-to-peer exchange. What do I mean by that, right? What do I mean? So it's kind of like, instead of arbitration, you have prevention. So what you're engaging this non-custodial exchange, like the non-custodial exchange can serve as a matchmaker. It can verify that the funds are there between each party. It can monitor the transaction before it's finalized, and check on behalf of both parties to make sure that it's all good. Kind of like an escrow agent in a way, like an instant escrow. It can do all these things in a non-custodial manner, and both parties can pay it for that in the same transaction that gets finalized. So they never took custody of the funds, but yet they played a value add in the peer-to-peer exchange, and they acted as an authority such that there doesn't need to be arbitration. It's a preventative of validating and finalizing. There's a crab. My daughter just came up and said there's a giant crab that's out here.
Saipan life.
Saipan life. There's a crab on my deck. So does that make sense in terms of what I'm talking about?
Yeah, roughly. So if I get this correct, because I was thinking a lot about these, and I actually designed a like fully on-chain, completely non-custodial exchange, slpdex.cash. Now the domain expired, so that project is basically gone. But the idea was you lock up coins on the chain, and they're like floating UTXOs. You put a specific OP return in there or something, and that way you can index it. You can be like, okay, where are these? Let me collect them all. You put them basically in an order book, and then you can be like, okay, here is some BCH. That was back in BCH. Here's some BCH. I make a transaction that takes the UTXO. The UTXO ensures that a sufficient amount of BCH is paid to the recipient, and done so in a like the innovation behind that was that you could pick any amount. Like you could basically milk the UTXO for a certain amount. Problem was that it only was like you could only put buy orders, but you couldn't put sell orders. But that's the thing. But that was my idea behind that. And now we have a new protocol, Swap, which is actually simpler. You just are like, hey, let me just publish all the data you need in order for us to communicate. And that, of course, because it's way more interactive, right? Like the other one is just okay.
It's also slower though. It's also very slow, right? And it still demands to work at scale. You still have to have the indexing, right? You still have to have, and I mean, so I wrote the swap protocol, and it works, right? Like it works, but I think ultimately the question is like, what are you trying to do? And what you're ultimately trying to do is you're trying to be regulatorily exempt. That's the key. No, seriously. And people would be like, well, what do you mean? It's all about the regulation. And it's like, yeah, it's all about the regulation, because actually the best way to do this is a custodial exchange. The fastest, most efficient way. Because from a technical standpoint, building a custodial exchange is like dirt simple. It's mostly front end work. Like the data layer, the back end of a custodial exchange is like nothing.
You can write that in like, even if you like have high performance stuff, like it takes like a week.
Like so easy to write, right? So like the easiest way to do this is a custodial exchange. But the problem with the custodial exchange is
MSB.
They're already heavily regulated, and they're about to be even more heavily regulated. And that's also the KYC, custodian. It's the domain of the banks. And it's what they know. They know how to regulate custody because they've been regulating custody for hundreds of years. Right.
And there is a place for those. Like it's like we need those.
They're not going away.
Yeah, it's a great company, and they have a specific purpose, and they will expand that purpose until they fill basically the same role as banks do right now. So there will be, and there might even be at some point like a central bank, quote unquote, for these exchanges. So okay, like you just deposit your crypto at us at our place, and we facilitate exchange. I don't know, like maybe that's a little bit too bold,
a person might ask, like well, aren't you just being Roger Ver here? Like, aren't you just trying to thumb your nose at the system? Like, what's the point? Why don't you just go get regulated? Or are you just cheap or whatever? And it's like, it does come down to capital. It really does come down to capital at the end of the day, right? Anybody can be a custodial exchange if they've got the capital to build a business that facilitates the regulation, like that, where you can actually deal with the regulation, get all the licensure, and do all the things that you're doing there. Okay. The problem there is you got to get that capital, and you're entering into a red ocean, a competitive market of people who already have that capital, and it's successful. What are you really bringing to the table? And even if you have some wonderful innovation, the amount of money that you then need to spend in marketing and all of that. Hold on. Okay, we were having it's late and my daughter wants to ride a bike on the deck. So here's the answer to what are we doing, right? Why is it important to have the non-custodial stuff? It's very simple. And the answer is innovation. It's innovation, right? We need to have an environment where some guys in a garage can create the next Apple or Google, right? You're never going to get innovation if you have to raise $100 million as your seed round to start a company.
And that's where Zook is coming from, Crypto Valley in Switzerland, right? Like they are basically silicon, like regulatory speaking. Like I talk to people and it's like quite simple, and the regulations aren't very strict, right? They still have, like in Switzerland, they still have the ATM law where you can exchange up to 1,000 euros, which is often more than enough, without verifying identity, right? You just have to make sure that you're not sending the same, like the person can fake being, like you just have to verify that they're unique. You don't have to verify their full identity and so forth. And you can do that like for up to €1,000 or Swiss francs. And you can use a Bitly or something, they're called. I went to one of their ATMs. I didn't have to provide any KYC information because they have these less strict regulations. So like that would be a case where it's just like the regulatory environment just allows for innovation. But,
and the manufacturers moved to Switzerland. The ATM manufacturers,
they're all there. Like it's kind of crazy.
They moved to Switzerland.
And I think now it's becoming a little stricter and stricter, especially through like the EU. And you can't really avoid that, and it's like kind of predictable. And that's where this non-custodial part comes in, because there it is. First of all, it's very much like the Wild West kind of situation. And second of all, you don't have the same level of risk as you have with fully custodial services, because it is non-custodial. And I guess that's also why this isn't really regulated, because like, no, like if you want to put your cash into the laundry machine, like that's you're free to do that.
That's
like
you.
That's you can do with your cash what you want.
I think this is an important thing that people miss. So I believe Hammerbacher or Hammersbacher is the guy's name. The guy who came up with I may have mentioned this on another show we were on. We did, but the guy who came up with Facebook's data architecture, I think his name is Hammerbacher. There's this quote from him where he said, the best minds of my generation spend their days trying to get people to click on ads, and that really sucks. Right? That's his quote. And it's very interesting, because it again goes right back to incentives. And it's like, well, this is the Web 2 days. You're a brilliant developer. What are you spending your time doing? Building businesses to get people to click on ads. Why? Because that's where the money is. All right. So you're a brilliant developer. What are you doing in crypto? What are you doing the last 2 years? You're building the DeFi crap and NFT things. And why are you doing that? Well, you're doing that because that's what you can do in an unregulated space. Like that's where you can build your own business in a garage. And so if this is what was missing, I think, in BCH, in BTC, was, it's one thing to be like, I'm going to build this project. And I'm a stickler about these things. But like, it's another, Roger would fund any crappy thing, and it's like, it's very important to start out in the beginning and say like, well, here's an entire class of things that are needed. And here's how we approach the space. So non-custodial exchanges. Okay, what does that mean? Here's like the structures of the way that this thing could look. Okay, so how do we have innovation in that space? Like, how do you actually build something first? How do you get something ramen profitable, as they call it, where you're like with bcash, right? To where you're like, I can build something and put out a product that I've funded myself, and then if there's investment or whatever, great. But here's the wonderful part about it, is that even if there's not, you've gained a huge, through doing that, you've gained a huge amount of competence where you're of value to the ecosystem, and you will end up making money in the ecosystem.
Yeah, which is my story. Yeah.
Which is mine as well, right? Because there are not that many people who have built things that actually work. So when people want to build things that work, they have a limited number of people that they reach out to. It's very simple. It's supply and demand. There's not a lot of people to call when you need something done.
And I had that during the conversation in Liechtenstein, and this was about EVM, Solidity and so forth. And they're like, no, there's like 4,000 Solidity developers, but there's, I guess, more than 4,000 EVM projects, right? So the supply is very, very low. The demand is very, very high, and 4,000 competent Solidity developers, of course. And they're like, no, you have to
Solidity, know. Solidity is just a language. Like, that's the thing, right? Because it's Turing complete. It's like, you just need to learn Solidity. There's no parity. Yes, go ahead.
It's
go
different.
Ahead, now you understand what I'm
because saying. On Ethereum, you write Solidity and that's it. And your program is on Ethereum and that's it. Like, the transaction structure is actually super simple because it just calls a smart contract. With Bitcoin, however, it's very different. First of all, you have inputs, you have outputs, very different. You encode your smart contract partially in the transaction structure itself. Like when I wrote the slbdex.cash, I was like, okay, the first output, it has to be this thing. Like that was the SLP thing. The second output, it has to be where the remaining coins go. And the third output is where the payment goes, or something like that. So you encode in the transaction itself how the contract, quote unquote, will be executed. And you have to be aware of that.
And like, we don't know all the things that can be done. That's the other interesting thing about Bitcoin, right? Where I'm constantly amazed of like, oh, it can actually do this. Like, oh, that's a trip. And a lot of like, even the SLP protocol itself, right? Like even these protocols, even being able to make these additional protocols that are there, that if you don't know what the protocol is, the transaction doesn't even look like anything. It's like, oh, it's just a weird transaction, right? Whereas if you look at a Solidity contract, like, okay, well, here's not the bytecode, obviously, but if you were to look at the code of the Solidity contract, you're like, okay, I can see, okay, this is what it does. It's Turing complete. Like, you get an idea of like, okay, here's what it does.
It's basically JavaScript, but a little bit more blockchain.
That's it. And I guarantee you, those 4,000 developers, 100 of them have innovated anything. The rest of them copy and paste from existing things that people have out there and change it a little bit. Oh, let's go build a Uniswap. Let's get, you know what I mean?
I'm betting 10,000. Oh, wait, let me.
Right. But that's very different with Bitcoin, right? Because there's almost no reason for you to even be doing anything in script if you're not innovating.
Well, right now, because it's such a new thing.
Like, why are you even messing with it? If there's not something specific that you want to do, why are you even messing with it? right? So almost everyone who's involved, who's doing anything, is innovating, because you can't just pick it up. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to go try a hello world, some Solidity hello world.
Yeah.
You know,
There's
there
no
isn't
hello
that.
world of script.
No.
I mean, the hello
there's no
world, I
hello world.
guess, is pay to public key
Public
hash or
key
something.
hash. Yeah, that would be the
but-
hello world. But still, it's like, that's far from a hello world, right? That's the most used thing.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So, that would be like, no, like I'm writing a calculator app, right? I guess.
It demands something so different. And how do you build an environment where people are incentivized to do that? That's what's missing in eCash. Like, can we do all the things? Like, can we do DeFi? Yep. Can we do dApps? Absolutely. You know, I think this is a missed opportunity on BCH. Like,
yeah, big time.
They had $6 million worth of tether on there.
Like, and they completely squandered it.
Why was there no BCH to tether atomic swaps, like as a DEX? Why is that not being funded by Roger Ver?
And it would be simple. And they did have that a little bit.
Easiest.
I think they had the little bit on memo.cash, but it was like shitty. Like, it was like, hey, someone had like the idea and he spun it up, but nobody cared.
Yeah, their protocols not good. It's like, why is that not in the bitcoin.com wallet?
Yes, exactly. Why aren't you using that in the bitcoin.com wallet?
And here's what's crazy. They've got sideshift.ai in there, right? But it's like, wait, why are you not using this in the bitcoin.com wallet, especially since you could trade it on Sideshift?
And they probably paid a lot of money to get Tether on BCH. I can guarantee that.
And bitcoin.com helped them do it, by the way. Like, helped them, like, shepherded them through getting it there. And it's like, wait a minute. Or even Flex USD. Why was there no swap Flex USD to BCH? Right? Why could I not do that inside the bitcoin.com wallet, which is actually easy to do, and two, CoinFlex could have actually been the counterparty. They could have been the counterparty. You had the liquidity. You didn't even need to do a liquidity pool. You clearly had the liquidity to do it. And it's like, why was that not there? You know, and I think that for this next phase, that's really for eCash. That's what I would like to see, is like, there's going to be a next phase. So it's like the ICO boom. Why were there no ICOs done on SLP?
All right. 0. Exactly. Like, the number's precisely 0. Maybe there's some people who like try to pretend, but I don't know of any. Well,
okay. Granted, I think the ICO thing was over when the SLP standard was.
Yeah, but you can still do ICOs.
Still. Okay. But
like, ICOs still happen.
But I'm saying to ride the upswing, right? To ride the upswing. So like, why was there no DeFi on BCH or eCash?
There is the any hedge. And that's
not DeFi. That's not DeFi. That's like, it's a weird little escrow thing that doesn't work. That was never going to work, right? But they pumped it up as though it was going to do some incredible. It does nothing, right? Why was there no push that it's like, let's do DeFi on chain? Instead, they were like, let's build an EVM so that we could do what all of them are doing,
and make it fully custodial.
And make it fully, because it ended up being fully custodial. But if we're looking for lessons, like, these are the lessons. If there's fix it with Bitcoin. And to say like, okay, here's what to incentivize. Here's the next big thing. You know, they tried to do, and they did NFTs on BCH, to be fair. Right? They did do NFTs on BCH. But they did it wrong. They made a whole new protocol standard, right? As opposed to just leaving the SLP standard the way that it was. Just say, it's an NFT. Supply one. Here's the thing. You can do some other things where you like, actually,
You group them together in some way.
I'll tell you how they did the grouping wrong. They went the wrong way. They went in reverse. Right? So what they did was, how the SLP standard NFT works is, you make like this Uber minting token, and then you can mint children from that, and then those children can kind of like mint children. So you have like the Uber grouper, then you have like the minters, and then you like the group minters, and then you like mint out of that. No, you go the opposite way. Right? You go the opposite way. The opposite way is, you make all of the things in your, you make all of the NFTs. Things in your the NFTs in your sequence or whatever, and then you have them all, you take all of them, and you're gonna like spend out like in the first one, or maybe you take the mint baton and you throw the mint baton into a UTXO, all of them into a transaction, and then you take them all and you burn them into a group. Right? So basically what you look at is, then you just go, oh, there's 1 and 0. Let me go look at the mint baton. Oh, the mint baton was in this, was one of these inputs in this thing that was in this, and you make a new one for that. And then you're like, oh, that's the group.
And
right?
you can make that still like so forward compatible, that you like can mint you can mint new stuff into there. Yeah,
oh,
that makes
of
way
course,
more sense.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
Right? Of course you can. Right? Or you do it with a spend.
Like one idea Alex and I had, and we had a lot of ideas, but one was that let's just make coupons for all kinds of products, but we would still want them to be grouped. I don't know where it was exactly, but I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if the NFT spec just allowed like arbitrary quantities, like, because they forced it to be 1, right? But if with your thing you can do like, it's even more general. It's even more general. Yeah. We just take and all the non-NFT wallets would be able to use your thing. Like RidePay currently doesn't support NFTs. If they went with what you just described, and which is like way more simple. I mean, at least the NFT part. Then every existing SLP wallet wouldn't have to upgrade. No. And they would just like the newer wallets could like group them together into like one bundle. But other than that, it would be the same.
I mean, the key is like, how do you spur innovation? It shouldn't be, especially you and I, like it shouldn't be you and I. Mm-hmm. The real role that we should be playing is, somebody says, I want to do this. And do they have the resources of somebody who's like, oh, let's think about that. You could maybe do it like this, right? Mm-hmm. The people who know. And it's to promote. I think that this is really what's lacking, and clearly it's lacking on BCH, because they believed that they had to create smart BCH.
Yeah,
right. And the BTC people have said, you got to create these second layer solutions to do all these things, or what's their Taproot and all of the, and even Taproot doesn't really do anything. You know what I mean? It's like, we have this great object data sig, like it's fantastic. It does like, we don't even know all the things that it could do. Yeah. We're still learning and figuring out all the things that we could do with covenants and spending constraints and all kinds of things, right?
And I just recently discovered how you can increase the opcode limit quite trivially if you just check, like you write the like root covenant, and all it does is check the other inputs if they're a specific script pub key. And
and then you put them in the other. You put it in the other inputs,
and then the actual execution is in the other things. And then you can pump that up and you could do it recursively. Yeah, I mean, doing that is it's super like difficult to do that. And but it's not. It's relatively efficient. It's not inefficient, and you can write tools for that. And that's
and that's the important thing, right? Is that like it doesn't take that many people. You only write these things really once.
Yeah.
And then you develop the libraries, and it's like, okay, here's the inputs that you need. And it always works. That's the other great part about it, right? Is that it's like, and it's very easy to write very secure code.
Yeah. In script, it's like, did I do that correctly? And I'm like, yeah, it has to. Like, these are the three things it can do. Like, it can do, it can get this, and can get this, and that's it. And of course, There are still booby traps, but
Sure.
that can all, like, especially the like if you concatenate stuff, you have to be very careful about the padding. But yeah, all of that. So one idea I had recently, and
but compared to Solidity.
Sorry, I think your video just dropped. You're still there?
Uh-oh.
Oh, you're back. I hear your voice. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I don't see a video. Yeah, my internet is still working. Okay, you're back.
My connection is crap.
My internet is still working. Let's see. I don't see it moving.
Oh no, I think it's that might be the end.
Oh, I see you again.
Am I moving?
I think it's getting better. I can hear you. I can hear you. Okay. Let's see. I think it's back.
I think that's probably the indication that it's time for me to go. but we got to do this again.
We covered a lot of ground. And I think now we're like going in the
we're gonna get to the technical
that will go over
discussion.
the head of most people. Yeah. But it's where where the actual innovation and inspiration will come from for future developers. So you froze again, but hopefully this will be received on your end. So I really appreciate that you came on and gave so much time. Like it's almost
agreed.
It's like 2.5 hours or something. Really glad you did that. Yeah, let's do that again. And like there's still a lot of topics we can cover, especially on the script side. We're both two champions of script. Definitely lots of innovation possible there. Also, maybe we can at some point talk about some opcodes that, like, for example, 64-bit integers or something that would be useful, and things that we would like to see. Because you also voiced like, oh, what if we had like this thing added? What if we had like this kind of signature part?
I think I'm good off of those now. I'm not. Okay. Now's not the time. I don't think those are the times to suggest. Like we're in a state now where I'm like conservative, because it seems like it's just bad to things need to even out with people not expecting changes. And there will be a time in the future, but it's not now.
And also we're not really using the current feature set at all, and we can do a lot before we really like need to have these other things on. Yeah, all right. It was a great pleasure to have
Great talking with you. Wonderful talking with you as always.
Say greetings to your family.
I will. And everybody go to the electronic cash.
Oh yeah, we forgot to talk about that.
And go check it out. I will be speaking there. We'll do another one plugging it as we get sooner for the last minute people, for sure.
Let's do that.
Brother.
Bye.
I'll see you soon. Bye.